you can't give up. You have to stay the course. And you have to offer that grace as the first step. Jesus does that for us. We have to do that for each other. And that's the first step. And one, not growing bitter, and two, creating an opportunity where trust can be rebuilt.
Thank you for joining us for the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. This podcast is for blended families, the people who love them, and anyone who just wants to improve their marriage and family relationships.
BKF exists to break the cycle of divorce, equip marriages, and unite blended families with the truth of God's Word. It is our hope that today you will receive biblical guidance and practical resources that will bring unity and peace to create your thriving, healthy home. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome to the BKF podcast. We are so excited you're here with us today. If you happen to be listening on Audible, please know that the full video format of this podcast is on our YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe, comment, leave us a review, and be notified every single Monday when we drop a new podcast. We are super excited to have live in our studio Dave and Ashley Willis. It is so great to have you guys.
Oh, we're thrilled to be here.
Yeah, finally.
Yes.
We get to hang out with you guys in person, but
Yes.
this is the first time that we've done a podcast together in the same room, I think.
Absolutely it is.
And so it's great to be here.
Yes.
Well, and if you haven't checked it out already, Dave and Ashley have been on our podcast twice now. So you can go back, review those podcasts. They're amazing people. They do amazing work. But as we get into it, guys, just tell us a little bit more about you, your family, what you guys like to do for fun.
Well, sure. So we have been married almost 21 years, and we are college sweethearts. We met my freshman year, Dave's junior year, in acting one class, and which is part of our communications major. We went to a small Christian school, and we've had so much fun. You know, all these years being married, we have 4 boys, ranging in age from 17 to 7, and life is full of all kinds of adventure and fun, and I know you guys can relate completely.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we love it.
I love it. Now, and we love watching you guys even on social media, because it's just funny. And you guys, if you have not checked out their Thursday night, like from the van tips,
From the minivan
date night, it's the best thing ever. And I keep joking with Scott, I'm like, we need to go visit Dave and Ashley and then just pop out the back one Thursday, be like,
We're here too.
live with Scott and Vanessa too. You know,
You were invited. We've never done double date.
double date. Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?
That would be fun.
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, but I love, and you guys, I mean, very family oriented. I love, you take your kids everywhere with you. And even before, Dave was saying that like y'all drove 2 states to come do all podcasting this week and brought the fam with you. And so it's fun. All right, you guys, well, I want to tell you a little bit more about Dave and Ashley. They are a part of the XO Marriage team, which you guys probably know, but if you have not checked out XO Marriage, you guys, you have to go check it out. It's one of the greatest marriage ministries. I mean, we're partial to it because we love XO. But they are hosts of the Naked Marriage podcast. If you haven't checked that out, you need to, because it's awesome. Also, authors of the Counterfeit Climax, which is what we're going to be talking about today. The Naked Marriage, Naked and Healthy, and y'all have so many more other books, like Peace Pirates, and Dave, you have other books as well, so y'all write a lot.
Yeah, well, typing fast is one of my only skills. Like, I'm not good at much.
You're good at so much.
I'm pretty good at trivia, and I can type fast, and that's basically it. And so, trying to just leverage that to the full.
So funny. I love that. Well, and Dave, you're also a pastor, and Ashley, you're currently in grad school getting your master's as well.
Yes.
So yeah, man, you guys have a lot going on.
Well, the thing that I love the most is your passion for marriage is evident.
Yeah.
And your humor is contagious, which is why so many people love to tune in. So again, I'll just reiterate, if you're married and you're listening to this and you're within the sound of my voice and you don't know the Naked Marriage, or you're not listening to their podcast, you have to tune in. It is really good because you deal with everything, but a lot of what you guys talk about is sex. Hence the title, The Naked Marriage, which is cool, by the way. But I love the depth that you guys go with this. If you've listened to anything that they've done on their podcast or read their books, the depth at which you combine the spiritual aspect and so many practical tips with sex and marriage. Let me ask one question that I didn't have scripted. Did you guys plan on introducing the Naked Marriage? Like when you guys got married, because y'all been married for almost 21 years. Did y'all get together at one point and be like, hey, let's do a podcast on the Naked Marriage? How did that come about?
You know, the origin of that, so like we had started doing some marriage ministry that didn't really have, at the time, like any real form, any brand, any name. We were just we were just doing stuff, you know,
Yeah.
writing blogs and just, you know, God kind of gave it a shape eventually, but we didn't start with this clear vision. We were like, let's just encourage marriages. And an early blog post that happened to be one that I had written, it was about Adam and Eve, and the title was How to Have a Naked Marriage. This was from like 2014 or 15.
Yeah.
And I noticed people were clicking on that a lot more. Like there was something
Yeah.
about that phrasing that just sort of resonated with folks.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking back then, like, you know, if we get to a point where we have to kind of brand this whole thing
Yeah.
in some way, like I think that might be the title. I think
That's awesome.
The Naked Marriage or Naked Marriage, I think that it sums up a lot of what we're talking about. Because like our core message at the time was really about those things. Nakedness, not only physically, like Adam and Eve were physically naked, but also nakedness emotionally, spiritually. It's a picture of having nothing to hide from each other. It's a picture of vulnerability and transparency. And then just the word naked, you know, it catches people's attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, just from a marketing standpoint, it might catch people's attention. And so the seed was planted back with that blog post.
Yeah.
And then when we got when we joined with XO Marriage, we just are so thrilled to be part of that team, by the way. And if you've never been to one of the XO Marriage conferences, come. They're the most fun marriage events on the planet. xomarriage.com. You can get all the info. And then it came time for us to start a podcast, and we were having conversations about what's the name of our first book going to be, what's the name of that podcast going to be, and we came back to how about the Naked Marriage?
I love
and
it.
it's just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Love that.
We're going to dive into your new book, The Counterfeit Climax, which is phenomenal. But first, just tell us kind of your heart for writing this book and kind of what your thought process was.
Yeah, well, we hear from a lot of people in doing the ministry that we do with XO Marriage and the Naked Marriage podcast, and we've just found this trend with people, with married couples specifically, you know, really struggling with sex, and it's, you know, one or both spouses, and a lot of it, you know, we were kind of seeing this pattern of people really struggling with really lies they were believing about sex, about their own bodies, about their past, about their spouse's past, and just sex in general. And what we found too is whether or not you had sex before marriage or you were married before and you're remarried, you know, whatever kind of path people came from, that everybody has some form of baggage. And a lot of it, you know, comes from our experiences prior or lack thereof, and just assumptions that we've made. Sometimes, you know, we grew up in churches that really just were negative and harping on waiting, you know, to have sex before marriage, which is a good thing. But they were harping so much on that when people maybe didn't wait, they felt so much shame that they carried this shame inside of them, and then carried that into their marriage, and just felt like, well, now my lot in life is just that I'm never going to have the marriage or sex life that I could have because I totally messed this thing up. And so we just really wanted to write, you know, a resource that would really help people to unpack this. And I know you guys are huge into mental health and have so much background in that. And what we found is a lot of these sexual issues that people deal with go back to a mental health issue.
Yeah.
And not necessarily a diagnosis per se, but just, you know, these lies that are so embedded in our minds that it's just this hindrance when it comes to the true connection we want to have with sex, because really that's what really sex is about. That's what God designed sex to be, is a connection, is this amazing physical, mental, spiritual connection and emotional connection that God wants married couples specifically to have. And yet so many married couples, they don't even really sometimes know what they're missing or what even the aim of it is, and they just kind of feel frustrated at the state of things. And so in the book, we go through all the different kinds of lies and even behaviors that people can kind of find themselves stuck in. And at the end of every chapter, we really get down to the nitty-gritty with a lot of questions that people, as they're reading this, can ponder individually. But then the goal is really to take the next step and to talk to their spouse about it.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
really good.
No, and I'm telling you, the topics that are discussed in here, whether it's, you know, baggage from the past, pornography, really the state of the world, and some of the things that you guys talked about in terms of the futuristic state of what society is telling us sex is going to be, is really traumatizing and scary, especially, you know, considering how people are learning about it.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you, Ashley. A lot of times in the church, they just don't talk about it. A lot of families don't even talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
They just kind of expect things to work.
Yes.
So I know there's a lot of couples that are, maybe you're listening to this and you're like, sex is just one of those taboo topics. And I envision people just they get into their rut, and then they just stay in their rut. And they're like, this is just what sex in my marriage is.
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't really ever deal with the pain from the past. They don't ever deal with even the current of, hey, let us talk about this. So my first question is, if couples who are listening to this, from you, how do you prepare to have those conversations?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and that's really one of the main points of the book is just preparing couples for the conversations. Because communication is at the heart of most marriage issues, including sexual issues in marriage. But what we found in the work that we do is that couples don't talk about their sex lives very much.
Yeah.
And for a lot of couples, they're scared too. They find the act of talking about sex more intimate and vulnerable than the actual act of making love itself. And so they don't do it. I think maybe they're afraid to face some of their own insecurities, sort of voice their own insecurities. They're maybe afraid to really face some of the baggage that they've carried. And that baggage can come from like all different kinds of things. If you entered marriage a virgin, you still have some form of sexual baggage just because of mindsets, because of expectations, because of images that have been imprinted there. And then when we combine that with, poor choices we did make, we carry some of that in.
Yeah.
And if we've experienced any kind of abuse, we can carry that. And those wounds are very deep. And a combination of all of these things, and then we get into the reality of marriage, and we have this expectation maybe that, we make these some people make these sort of unspoken deals with God. Like, all right, Lord, I'm gonna do things a certain way, and then once I get married, my reward is gonna be, I'm gonna have the best sex on demand whenever I want it, and that it's never gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, we get in marriage, and no marriage looks like that. Every marriage has some issues, some setbacks, some frustrations, some hormonal ups and downs, some exhausting seasons, some body image issues, just all of the stuff. And then when that happens, we're not prepared to deal with that. And we don't know how to talk about it without, one, either hurting our spouse's feelings, or two, really doing the courageous work of confronting our own fears. And so really the book, more than just giving information, really it's designed to give a roadmap to help couples be guided through those conversations in a way where it takes some of the intimidation out of it. Because it doesn't have to be this big, scary, intimidating thing. It can be a natural thing that you talk about regularly, just on your walks or over breakfast. And the questions that we put in the book are designed to kind of prompt some new conversations and new thoughts about sex. Because the more you connect outside the bedroom, the better you're going to connect inside the bedroom. And so that's what the book's designed to do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we talk about in our book that's coming out in the fall,
which is great, by the way.
Yes,
thank
you guys. Yes, they left an amazing review, you guys. So we hope you all check it out. But intentional intimacy, and like you said, Dave, having those conversations, and really, I think knowing like what your spouse likes, like what do you like?
Yeah.
Right.
When we're having sex, what do you not like? Maybe if you came from past abuse or trauma, or maybe you were sexually abused as a child, even walking through things that may trigger certain things. And
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
and we're all big proponents of biblical counseling and seeking some godly counsel that can maybe like walk with you guys through those things and just speak life into those areas as well. But I love that it's this roadmap, because I think a lot of couples, they just don't even know where to begin.
It's so true.
And just they don't even know where to begin with the conversation of how to bring that up. So I love that. I think that's great.
Well, it's sensitive. You know, nobody really wants to, when you get married, I think a lot of people go into it and going, okay, I've made it to this point. We've, in JP in your foreword actually talked about this. Yeah. I've made it to this point. We're at the back of the church. Everybody, it's all signed and delivered. I'm free. Everything from my past is free, and I'm ready to start anew.
Right.
When at the end of it, you're still carrying this. And we talk about baggage that shows up in marriages. And I know blended families, they deal with this even more because they have been married in the past. They do have kids from previous marriages. So a lot of this is bringing up. But it's sensitive to bring up in conversation, even with your spouse. Hey, let's talk about this. Has this ever happened to you? What do you think about this? And I love that the book really does go into detailed questions, because you can read it as a couple.
Yeah.
Again, God designed sex to be amazing for spouses. It's supposed to be.
Right.
So, if you can't have that conversation or have some emotional vulnerability with your spouse, this book is a great roadmap to be like, I don't know where to start. Pick up the book, read the first chapter, and ask the questions to each other.
Well, thank you.
It's absolutely wonderful. And we're kind of segueing. We're talking a little bit about the abuse or maybe the baggage from the. It also talks about addiction a lot, pornography addiction, and we know this is rampant in our culture, and we know that it destroys marriages. I don't want to focus so much on the problem as I do want to focus on maybe some solution side of it. So as a spouse, and this is not just, I think men is the predominant, but also women as well. As a spouse, how can you support your spouse through these things, or how can you divulge, and how would you go about that process?
Yeah. No, it's so important. It's part of our story. We share our whole testimony in the book, and we have a lot of videos, free videos online where we go into more detail. But this was a struggle for Dave, and I found it, and he immediately, when I addressed it with him, that's the first step is getting it out in the open, recognizing it as a problem. And he immediately admitted to it and said it was like the worst day and the best day all at the same time, because he felt like a captive, like he was just a slave to it, basically. And I think he was so glad that finally, it's out there, the problem has been identified, and now we just need to walk together to find the solutions. And I think the hardest part of this with any kind of like porn addiction or sexual addiction, it can really feel personal to the person who's been wronged. And I know, I have so many women who write me whenever I share about this, and they're like, how did you ever come to a place where you wanted to have sex with Dave again? Like, because truly, didn't you think about those images you saw on the computer, and didn't you wonder if he was lusting after these other women or whatever it is? And I totally get those questions and those thoughts. And I remember in those early days of me really having to be very aware of where my mind was going, because I had every right to be angry, and I was. I mean, we have to process our emotions, absolutely. But we don't want, here, my husband is dealing with this thing that he's felt like he's a slave to. I don't want to become a slave to my emotions, to my anger, to my resentment, to my wanting to punish him. Because, as human beings, our natural tendency is, you hurt me, I want you to hurt. And so I could have just been like, well, I'm shutting this down, sorry, never have sex again. And there's a lot of women and maybe men who've been wronged, by their wives having this, who feel that way, who are like, you know what, I'm just going to shut it down and make you hurt. And I just knew from resources that we had read, and just from what the Bible says about these things, that was not the answer. And so there was a short time where, we weren't having sex as Dave was beginning the healing process, but we knew we wanted to quickly get to be intimate again. It's just, when we are completely not intimate, and there's different fields of thought on this, I want to say. This is just coming from us. You can read a lot of different opinions on this. But the longer you go without it, and I know there's sometimes reasons people have to, but just talking in the sense of like if there's been a wrong, the longer you go without it, the more you kind of open both of yourselves up to temptation. And we don't want to do that. We want to be able to move towards intimacy, and obviously physically having sex, but also just that connection, that intimacy of talking, at a deep level with each other. And so we had a lot of talks, and we got resources right away. And there's so many there's even more resources today. This was, many years ago that Dave dealt with this, but we immediately at the time reached out to, there was a ministry, and it still is, called XXXchurch.com. It's XXX Church. Make sure you put the word church on the end of that, .com. And they have great resources, not only for filtering systems and apps and things like that we put on all our devices, but they also have counselors and support groups that both the person who is addicted to porn can be part of, but also the spouse who's trying to help their addicted spouse. And I think and they're always, trying to get more resources out there to people. There's Covenant Eyes is a great Christian, app that helps to filter different, all your different devices. There's something called Canopy. They actually sponsor our podcast. They're amazing. There's a lot that's out there. We currently use something called Custodio, and it's spelled Custodio. The reason I like it is because it's easy. And so it's just an easy techno, it takes little knowledge of applying this app. And that's my kind of app. And it's effective. And it just, it blocks things that you don't, want your spouse and yourself to see and your kids to see. But it also, it holds you accountable if you are searching for something you shouldn't be searching for. And in the beginning when Dave was getting over this, there were several relapses, and that's very normal, like with any addiction.
Yeah.
And as a spouse, what we have to do is just keep on, fighting for the marriage, reminding our spouse they're not damaged, they're not too far gone. And that's like with any struggle, and facing it as a problem that is something you're facing together. I think, it's easy to want to be like, well, this is his problem. He made this mess. He's got to fix it. But if we do it that way, then we're really missing out on the collective effort that we need to make as a married couple to fight it together. And so we knew that it wasn't like a his problem or her problem, but it was our problem. And so we went through it together, and it wasn't easy. It's a process. It takes time.
Yeah.
But Dave's been free from that for many, many years, and we thank God. God made it possible. But there's also work that has to be done to really renew your mind, like the Bible says. You got to free yourself of those images and believe that God is healing you, and also putting His truth in there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at this issue, and as it comes to the surface, it's basically like a geyser. Once the problem is identified, there's just a no holds barred.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at the concept of trust, and I think it's really interesting when people start talking about trust. Is trust is fragile, but it's also rebuildable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't see that as their whole journey. If you looked at it in marriage and said 50 years of marriage or 70 years of marriage, is our trust going to be broken along the way, and how do we rebuild that trust?
Yes.
Because it may be something like an addiction, it could be something, a word that's said or an attitude that's had, and we've heard all those stories about just the life cycle of a marriage and different things it goes through. But I really want to focus on trust because I say it this way. If there's somebody who's listening that has a problem and they're worried about trust never being rebuilt, they don't want to say anything. And if there's somebody who's listening to this that says, I having a hard time building trust with my spouse again, I just want to tackle the whole thing. And I know in the book it talks about, and one of the things I love is just it's possible. Trust is rebuildable. It takes time. But I just want to get your thoughts on, how do you rebuild trust?
That's a great question. And understanding that trust can be rebuilt is one of the most important principles to know in marriage, because you're going to wound each other's trust to different levels.
Yeah.
Just because none of us are perfect, and sin always breaks trust, and to varying degrees depending on the kind of sin. Jimmy Evans, the founder of our ministry, one of the best quotes on trust I've heard is he says, "Trust is built in drops, but it's lost in buckets."
Yeah.
And just one little drop at a time. Consistency is the only way to build trust.
Yeah.
Something we teach about is that forgiveness and trust are two different things. And so when you've been wronged, you have to give forgiveness instantly, because forgiveness can't be earned. Grace cannot be earned. It can only be given.
Yeah.
But trust is the opposite. It has to be earned. It can't just be given.
Yeah.
So when you've been wronged, when you give your forgiveness, what you're saying is, God, I'm trusting you with this pain. And I'm trusting not this person, I'm trusting you, Jesus. And I'm giving it to you so that I don't grow bitter and I don't grow angry and I don't have to carry the weight of this. I don't have to be the punisher. I don't have to do any of that. I'm going to trust it in your hands. And then once I've done that, I'm giving up the right to get revenge. I'm giving up the right to hold this sin over this person's head for the rest of their life or use it as ammunition. And instead, my heart's open so that I can heal and so that they can start to rebuild the trust that was broken. It gives them the opportunity to rebuild the trust. When you say, I've forgiven you, it doesn't mean I trust you yet. It doesn't mean that we're healed yet. I'm still wounded, I'm still hurting. But because of my love for you and my trust in God, I'm choosing to put this in His hands so that together we can do the business of healing. And then that grace gives that person the opportunity to start rebuilding the trust, which happens a drop at a time, a day at a time, and one small act at a time. And consistency is the only way to do it. There are no shortcuts. But then one day you'll wake up and you realize there have been so many drops put back in that bucket that you trust again. It doesn't happen all at once,
Right.
Yeah.
but it happens. But you can't give up. You have to stay the course, and you have to offer that grace as the first step. Jesus does that for us. We have to do that for each other. And that's the first step, and one, not growing bitter, and two, creating an opportunity where trust can be rebuilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
And our audience it's primarily blended families. We do have, some singles and And just even couples who are not blended listen all the time. But I would say maybe for a couple who, after listening to the podcast and maybe they're struggling with addiction or, trust or things like that, what just like golden nugget or wisdom or encouragement would you give them if they're just like in a season struggling with their spouse with some of these issues?
Oh my goodness. I would just say that, we need to remember that there are no perfect marriages out there. I think sometimes when, like for example, when I found those images on our computer in our dingy basement, which is, first of all, if you struggle with pornography or looking at things you shouldn't be looking at, don't put your computer in a hidden place. We learned that, the hard way. And we've obviously, this was like the days of clunky computers.
This was even pre-smartphone.
Back then exactly. It's a lot trickier now, it is. But I remember, when I first found it, I did feel this sense of I'd known something was a little funky with Dave because we know when something's off with our spouse. I didn't know it was this. I mean, my mind never even went there. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, my bubble is burst. I had held Dave on this pedestal, thought we had the perfect marriage. You know what I'm saying? You have this, we tend to do that and think it's this fairy tale. And there's this moment where it's like, oh my gosh, this is not good. This is not good. We got to address this. And I think it's so easy to get discouraged and think well, now everything's changed. We're never going to get back what we had or whatever we thought we had. And I would just say this, we need to remember nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect, Dave's not perfect, nobody in this world is. But I take great comfort in that because, God's not looking for perfection. He just wants us to go to Him. And He wants us to give it all to Him and hopefully make progress through that because we're all works in progress. And the more I remembered that and remembered that I'm frail too, and even though in this particular situation with the porn addiction, Dave hurt me, that there's things that I struggle with too. And I think that if you're in that season of struggle, you got to remember, we are not perfect people. We make mistakes, but God is good, and God will use this for our good and His glory. And what I've seen that I never expected that, 20 years ago or so that this all happened, is I never expected that God would redeem it over and over again. Not only through our marriage, but in what He's done through us being able to share the testimony. It's helped a lot of people. And maybe porn's not the issue for a couple listening today. Maybe it's something else. I think focusing on the healing and the process, doing the work, because it takes work. It always does. Always takes longer than we ever want it to, but God's timing is perfect. But knowing there will come a day when you'll be like, oh my goodness, I don't want to go through this again, but I don't wish it away because I have grown so much from this situation and God has used it that he's actually used it to grow us. Because one thing I never expected too is that I feel like we actually, in doing the work afterwards, ended up growing closer. And not, I hope I'm not phrasing this in the wrong way, because certainly we don't want to bring on these things to ourselves. We want to be warned and not go to those things. But what is always unexpected is when you do lean into each other and allow God to really heal you. It kind of, I feel like it kind of brings to the surface other things that maybe were unhealthy, that you need to deal with. And then because when you work through that, you become healthier and you have more vulnerability. You have that naked marriage we talk about.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's... and I love that you said that because, again, I think a lot of people who listen who have, whether it's porn addiction or if it's any other addiction, they just want to have hope that things can get better. If there are problems in your, intimacy, they want hope that things can get better. I always go back to you go to the vows and it's nobody, you always say them and you're like, what did I say? For better or worse?
Right.
You run through all these and you look at what it takes to, for a marriage to survive decade after decade after decade. And you're right, Ashley, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. It is hills and valleys, and in the valleys you're working for each other and not against each other.
Right.
And it's being strong when the other's weak, and all the things that really God designed marriage to do, and the way He designed us as partners to support each other.
Yeah, and you said survive, but I think I want to change it to thrive. You want to thrive in your marriage. You want it to get better and better and better. And so, and I love that there's just, I love your vulnerability and just, I love your obedience. And like you were talking about, Ashley, like when you go through seasons like that of trials, God, you then have authority in that area, and God can use you to speak into so many other people and situations who are struggling with that. And I just love that. And I love that you guys have just been so bold on your podcast and through your books to just talk about it, because it is something that's not talked about. And I think we were talking about, it was the groundbreaking ceremony for EXO, and it was Brent's son or daughter that was talking about how they found a video on YouTube that had all these views, and it was about oral sex. I can't remember. But how great is that there is stuff out there for our kids, our teenagers, so our son's about to go to college in 2 years. Yes. It's something that he can watch that has a biblical foundation, and learn about it from God's eyes and not this distorted view of what the world is turning sex and marriage into. Yeah. And so I just love that. And so, we just honor you guys so much, because we love you. And we love that we get to hang out with him at, with EXO. But I mean, really, you guys, I think, I know it's impacted our marriage, and I know just millions of marriages. So it's truly is a blessing to have y'all here. And
this book is amazing, and it's got some really good topics, but it's also really funny in some places too. I'm not gonna lie, the vulnerability in writing, and I don't know some of the stories in this book are just downright hilarious.
Yeah,
so funny.
I mean, they're really late at night when I was typing. There was no filter on some of the stories. And
that is
they
so
left
funny.
them in.
If you can read a book that can make you think, really ponder, and then laugh out loud, funny, I think that this is a great book for you.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Well, the final question we always ask to all of our podcast guests, and you guys have answered it twice, but we love your answer every time. Blended Kingdom Family is the name of our ministry. What is a blended kingdom family to you?
You go first, sweetie.
Well, first off, I want to thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thanks.
I mean, what you're doing to speak life, specifically to blended families, into those marriages. It is such a need, and it's been an area where the church has largely failed. And you guys are such a voice for such a time as this that is really going to shape a generation and beyond. And so I just thank you, and I affirm those who are watching. And I affirm you and your family, and I just I'm just so thankful that this ministry exists.
Thank you.
We cheer you guys on, and know God's going to continue to open up great doors of opportunity for you to encourage more and more people. And to answer your question, what's a blended kingdom family? Well, I don't remember what I said before, but the way I see it, like the God's family by design is a blended family.
Yep.
It is.
It is like all of us, brothers and sisters within God's family, adopted by Him. And the kingdom is a family where our allegiance is not defined by our biology or our background, but it's defined by our love and commitment to one another. And that's what makes us the family of God. And that's the DNA of a blended family. It's like we're in this family, and we're defined as a family not because of biology or background, but because of our love and commitment to each other, which is stronger by God's design than any other factor in the world.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I just think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you. I love that.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, before we exit, where can they find you?
Where can we find?
Where can they stalk
find
you?
Like home address?
Home address, phone number, all that kind of stuff.
Well, we have the Naked Marriage Podcast, which comes out every Monday, and we also have some bonus content coming. So
stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that. Woo-hoo. And then we also are on Instagram at Dave and Ashley Willis. You can also find us if you put in marriage on Facebook. Our marriage page will pop up there, and our articles are at daveandashleywillis.com and xomarriage.com, and also on YouTube. You can find videos there. So
everywhere.
And if you want to see them live, EXO Marriage conferences, go to EXO Marriage, click on conferences. We're going to Pittsburgh next.
Yes.
And then that'll be, and then the fall, there's so many more that are coming out.
There are, yes.
Yeah.
So.
We're excited.
And I'm so excited that you guys are part of the EXO
Yes.
family.
Love
Blended
it.
Kingdom Families is part of the EXO,
That's
the
right.
EXO family. And so it's so fun getting to do ministry with you.
Love
Us
it.
too. Yeah, we're really loving the season, and we're just excited for you guys too.
Good stuff. Love it. Love it. And I know that if you listen to this, you are like, man, can I get more? Yes, you can. Go to where Ashley said. You can also go check out the other 2 podcasts they did with us on their book, The Naked Marriage, Naked and Healthy, which are just the different topics that you guys cover and the depth that you guys cover them. It's amazing. I love it. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you've had a wonderful, wonderful time. Make sure that you like, share, comment, subscribe. We'd love to include you in our community. Have a wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.